Welcome to this episode of Mosaic Days, where we talk about all things education, including student achievement and outcomes, professional development and training, and ADR ASAP. I am your co-host, Leonard Martinez.
And I'm Allison Smith.
What do you have on our agenda today?
So this is episode 3.
What do we have for our agenda today? Sorry, that didn't come out right. What do we have for our agenda
That's
today?
because, you're talking about ADR, which gets you all worked up. Alternative dispute resolution. This is the third episode in a 3-part series where we're talking about preparing for IEP meetings and making sure that they run as smoothly as possible. And, as mentioned before in our previous episodes, these are meetings that are potentially going to be a little bit more difficult.
More involved.
More
emotions.
That's correct.
In this meeting,
possibly
right?
Advocate, possibly attorneys, possibly
family, friends. Did you ever get that? Like, I'm a friend of the family. Did you get
parent
that?
Partner? I've gotten parent partners. I've gotten friends of family.
Yeah, in one district, they were all friends, and they would come. Like, there was a group of them, and they would be like, "We're friends of the family." I'm like, "Okay, that's great.
That's great. So what are you here for?" And so ultimately, in the previous 2, we had setting up and preparing for the meeting. Then we had what actually happens during the meeting and how you can make sure that the meeting runs more smoothly. This is now the meeting has taken place. We are done with the meeting. And so this is the follow-up. What do we do after the meeting?
And in many ways, I think this is the most overlooked, right? We do our planning, we do our staffing. We're trying to prepare for that meeting, like you mentioned, and we hold the meeting, whether it's contentious or it runs smoothly. We hold the meeting, but there is still some follow-up.
Yeah.
And if we don't do the follow-up appropriately, this could get us into a lot of legal trouble, as we've seen over the years with the lack of follow-up. So
that is correct.
It's very important that we write things down. I like to debrief. I don't think we do enough debriefing on anything, unfortunately. And we're glad to be done with it. We never want to let's never talk. That was so emotionally draining.
That's correct.
Let us never talk about that ever again. Can we wipe that from our memory?
Yeah.
No,
that's it. Well, that's what I was going to say. A lot of times I think that is the reason why there isn't follow-up, because there has been the prep or the anticipation that this is going to be a difficult meeting. And then potentially the meeting itself was difficult and it was lengthy, or it stopped and it was not finished on good terms. And so I think, at that point, I think you're exactly right. Staff, they don't come back together to debrief. If they come back together to talk about anything, is to complain about how hard it was, but not the action plan moving forward. So now we're at the point where we finished the meeting and we need to know what to do next.
Yeah. And just going back to the debrief part of it, I think that, tensions run high. We all get escalated. We all get escalated. I mean, I don't know how many times I've done contentious IEP meetings. I still get escalated. Yes. It's managing that escalation, right?
That's
and
correct.
Making sure that escalation doesn't manifest in something inappropriate to a parent or a staff member. So we have to be able to manage that. So debrief once you return to baseline. So don't do it right after the meeting. That's a horrible way to debrief right after the meeting. Wait a day, wait 2 days. Wait for people to have some time away from that, but genuinely engage in meaningful dialogue on what went right, because a lot does go right at these meetings. What went wrong? Why did it go wrong? And what could we have done differently to prevent that? I think that's super important. I don't think it ever happens. In my ideal world of IEP nirvana, I think that would happen, and we would become better professionals. And realize that at times we inadvertently or unfortunately intentionally escalate parents. And so we need to be able to take a look at being sensitive and empathetic. Again, the parent's emotions may run high because it is their child. We have to I always talk about theory of mind. How is that messaging being received by the parent when you're talking about their child? This is the most important thing in their life. And now we're talking about the kid can't sit still, the kid can't behave. How is a parent supposed to react to that?
Yeah.
If I was in that situation, it just wouldn't fly.
Yeah.
It just wouldn't fly. And so I think we need to be mindful in how we're conveying messaging to parents at times. Objective, tactful, empathetic, data-driven. And we have to have those conversations afterwards with our team to make sure everyone understands where it went wrong and what went right, and how can we course correct for future meetings.
It's interesting because sometimes when they ask or they let you know that they're recording the meeting, and so we of course record the meeting, I have found that the recording itself has actually been really a good tool for me as an administrator overseeing a team to go back, because in the heat of the meeting and then the emotions, you sometimes forget exactly what happened or how things were phrased. I myself have reflected on how did I phrase something and how might I have done that better. But also just to kind of see, like, structurally as the administrator at that meeting, how you could have moved the meeting along on a different path, maybe where there was an area where you could have, refocused back onto the agenda so that things, didn't get so escalated. So I think it's a really powerful tool for administrators to use to really reflect on how their team did.
You've gone back and listened to recorded meetings before?
I have.
Wow, that's pretty cool. I've only done it once.
I have.
And only when I was traumatized by that IEP, the IEP team turned on me.
Yeah. No, I actually did this last week. I actually did. And I find and I don't listen to the whole thing because there's no reason to rehash all of it. But there was something that maybe I was confused about on what they had asked about, and I needed to respond. And so I wanted to go back and actually listen. And I think it's also super important for me, especially as the facilitator, to look at my tone, my way. It is a self-reflective piece on how I handled it and and the way that I responded. And, I caught myself saying some things that maybe I shouldn't have said, or maybe I should have phrased it a little bit differently. So it is a good tool. I think I would never hand it to my staff and say, go relive this nightmare. Yeah. But I think as an administrator, I think it's helpful in your facilitation to really sit there and take a look at how you could have moved things in a different path.
And let's be honest, we've been doing this each now for over 20 years.
Yes.
We're not perfect.
No. Nope. Nope.
We're not perfect, and you hear me say this all the time. I fail daily at my job in some capacity or another. We're not perfect. Yeah. There's times where we say things and we say the wrong word or it's misinterpreted. But I like that. I like that either whether you have the recording or not, just going back in your head and replaying and reflecting and saying, could I have done this different? Mm-hmm. Could I have packaged this different? Yeah. I think that's so important for us. If we should be bringing teams together and having conversations, but minimally as the LEA rep and facilitator of these meetings, I really like that idea that you're going back and reflecting upon how you could have done things different or what you did really well. Mm-hmm. And that's reaffirming okay, that I set that, parent got it. It was perfect. We were in complete sync on what we were thinking about. Yeah. However, in this part here, if I could have done this a little bit differently, then maybe the parent wouldn't have escalated or whatever that process was for you. So important. Unfortunately, I think we should teach leaders how to do that reflection, and whether it's a journal, but really think about how we could improve the quality of service that we're providing for our parents by building relationships and having positive communication.
Yeah. And it's also one of those things, because I've had the experience that you've had, I'd like to think that I can steer most meetings in a productive manner. But when you do have that one where it's just completely blown up and you're like, what just happened? That is so powerful to see that sometimes it's not necessarily what you did. It was that person in that moment and how they were feeling and their emotions, right? Okay,
now I got to tell my story real quick.
Tell your story, because I want to hear it.
So I'll make it 45 seconds or less. So the team had this IEP with an advocate, and the advocate was recommending 10 behavioral goals, which is nonsensical. So we staffed, they said, Leonard, we want 3 goals. We don't want 10 goals. So can you engage in this conversation because you're the behavioral expert? And I said, sure. We'll do 2 goals. I don't even think 3 goals is appropriate. Mm-hmm. So we got there, and I was a district rep. I was a teacher on special assignment at the time, and I got to the behavior part, and I'm like, okay, the team wants me to do this, so I'm going to start that conversation. So we looked at the non-public agencies FBA, which I ripped apart because it was not done very well. And they were proposing 10 goals. So I'm like, okay, we're not going to do 10 goals. We're going to choose the 2 goals that are most impeding learning, and we're going to focus on those 2 goals. And so we're going back and forth I was going back and forth with the advocate. And I said, well, why don't we get some team input and see if the 10 goals is appropriate or the 2 goals? We went down to each team member, 10 goals, 10 goals, 10 goals, 10 goals. I'm like, what is happening?
Are you serious?
Like,
well, see.
What is happening here? The team wanted 2 goals. They didn't want 10 goals when it came. And they said, Leonard, this is what we want. And I'm like, okay, that's a problem. That's no problem. I agree with you. 2 goals is great. And then we went around the room to poll everyone. Everyone thought the 10 goals were appropriate.
Yeah.
And I'm like, what just happened? I debriefed. I was not happy. And I think we didn't do 10 goals. We did 4 goals maybe.
Yeah.
But if you know behavior, it's unprofessional to have 10 goals.
Oh, of course.
It's unprofessional, I think, to have 3 goals. You just can't manage a behavior intervention plan with 3 goals. 1, 2 goals maybe. But that team really kind of just left me high and dry. And this was 15 years ago.
I know, and you're still traumatized. He's still having trauma.
I'm still hanging on to it. I'm still hanging on to it.
It's hard because sometimes, you really want to move things in a positive manner, and I mean, I've been sitting there just trying to have a productive conversation and just steer things back on track and not being rude and being really professional and just really structured with time and everything. And I've had an advocate just, stand up and say, you are the rudest person that I've ever dealt with. And I am not continuing this meeting, and throw her stuff down and like storm out. And you're just like, but do you know what I mean? Like you feel personally responsible. So you feel
personally attacked too,
and attacked. Right? But I have, in that moment, it's important that you don't engage with them because they're, I mean, clearly we're not getting anywhere with this person, but also I think too, because part of it is like, wow, did I really escalate that person? And, so I'll ruminate on it. Oh my gosh, what did I say? And in that particular case, I had a recording. I went back to that section and I'm like, what did I do here? And so it's also helpful in validating that you, in times like that, didn't necessarily, I mean, for instance, you were doing everything that you were asked to do and you were moving it along in the appropriate manner. Like, you're not crazy in the way that you approached that. That was what you felt was your professional opinion. And based off of the data, what should have happened. And it's the same thing, when you have that data and somebody's attacking you, it becomes really hard. So, so I think after
tangent, we went off.
I know
we did a.
It was your story.
We did a 5-minute therapy session for us. Let's
That's all right. You feel better?
Let's facilitate and get back on our agenda. See, I'm getting us back on track.
Let's get us back. So one of the things that we talked about, because oftentimes in these types of meetings, there's a lot of things that come out of that meeting. There's a lot of either services, next steps. We're going to do follow-up. We're going to do a change in schedule. We have an IEE request that we're approving. We have an additional assessment request. So there's a huge long list of things. So I think as part of that debrief, it's also important that we stay on track with every single thing that we need to do to follow up.
And you bring up a good point. If we're going to get together to debrief, which I strongly suggest that teams do for some of these meetings, if you're going to come together to debrief, you should do a to-do list. Is the IEP finalized? It better be finalized.
Yeah.
Get all the pages finalized. Do you have to do IEP at a glance to give the teachers for new goals and accommodations? Yeah. Who's going to do that? Probably the case manager. Do we need to let service providers know that there's a revised offer of FAPE now? And what does that look like? So making sure everyone's on the same page on what we're supposed to do for next steps. Do we need to change class schedules, right? Did we increase SAI time or reduce it? So now we got to involve the counselor to make sure the counselor's making a schedule adjustment. Did we add transportation? Did we take away transportation? Notifying them. So making sure that whatever we discuss in the IEP and the consented portions of it, making sure that we're following up with the appropriate staff members for immediate implementation.
And really, in my opinion, while the case manager handles a lot of this, it is up to the administrator or the LEA rep who was at that meeting to make sure that all the follow through happens. So the worst thing that can happen is that you have things in the notes and there's no follow up.
We've seen it.
We've seen it. We get filings, right? When a parent has requested something and the team says, oh yeah, sure, we'll move ahead with that. And they do not get the assessment plan. They do not get the change in classes. They do not get the increase in services. That's a slam dunk. We are going to lose that filing right off the bat. You might as well just write a check. You know what I mean? Because if there is no follow through on what that team has agreed to, that is a huge problem. So really the LEA rep needs to be the person in charge, kind of the case manager that oversees that meeting to ensure all the follow through happens.
Yeah, and then ultimately they're the ones that should be communicating district office. Parent did not consent, or we have partial consent. We need district office support. So I think you know me, what I'm going to say. I'm a big fan of not getting district office involved. District office is there to support, and we want to support you, but we also want to see that you're doing what it takes to resolve this conflict. So I would say what's supposed to happen is you hold the IEP meeting. There's not consent. There should be a follow-up meeting with the administrator and that parent to discuss what are the challenges, what are the areas of disagreement, can we find some resolution? This probably doesn't happen at all, but it should happen. And then if that can't get resolved, then it should get escalated to district office, because now we have an IEP that's not consented to or partially consented to, and now we go into a dispute resolution. ADR, LAUSD calls it IDR, whatever you're going to call your dispute resolution process. Now you jump into dispute resolution process. I say leave district office out as much as you can. Some people would say we need district office involved every step of the way. I wouldn't be a fan of that if I was at the site level. I want to handle this as much as possible. Once you get district office involved, they may negotiate things that you don't want to implement, and you're going to be on the receiving end of providing these services that you don't feel are appropriate. Try to leave district office out of it if you can.
Well, and ultimately, I mean, parent then realizes that they go to district office, they get what they want, or they get more of what they want, and then they overstep you every step of the way. And so as a site administrator, I wouldn't want parents running directly. That's like running right to mom and dad to tell on me, right? It's like, I want to be able to establish that relationship and try and work through it. And if I cannot, then of course I will bring district office in. And then from there, like, I realize district office is going to do what they need to do. But at this moment, I want to be able to handle that, especially if you have had this really difficult meeting and you've done everything to move this forward and to be collaborative and supportive, but the data doesn't show it. That parent may go to district office and get everything that you've already said no. So then it's a reflection on you that, oh yeah, well, that administrator doesn't know what they're doing, right? So that's an area that I think sometimes administrators are not confident in, because they already feel like there's been issues in the meeting. Why is this parent going to listen to me? So they don't want to have that conversation with the parent after the meeting.
Well, and one of the things we talked about is that if you're having these contentious meetings, don't have the same admin sit in those IEP meetings. Give some rotation. We find that if it's the same admin dealing with the same parent with these contentious meetings, that relationship can be strained. Whereas if you rotate admin around those meetings, then it's kind of like evening out the caseload, I guess, if you will. But let's differentiate district office and ADR, which we're going to talk about a little bit. Parents come to me all the time for stuff. I had a parent in my office last week saying, we want this, we want this, we want this. A skilled special ed staff member at district office, whether it's a director, an assistant director, compliance officer, program specialist, whatever your role is at district office in your district, we don't make decisions outside of an IEP meeting with the asterisk of ADR, which we're going to get into. So when parents come to me and say, I want transportation for my kid, easy answer. I don't make that decision. This is a request that you make from your IEP team and have a discussion on if your child is eligible for transportation. So as they try to bypass the site admin and the site team, which they do, they try to bypass the hierarchy. I immediately go to them and say, you got to go back to the team, because I don't make that decision. We do not make decisions outside of an IEP team unless we're doing dispute resolution. Again, which is a special circumstance. So the special ed administrators at district office should not be engaging in a parent about IEP related services and programs, because they're not the IEP team.
Exactly. So now what if they've come to you and they've said, oh, well, I already had this. I already had a meeting. I already brought up transportation. They don't want transportation. They turned down transportation. I sat in the IEP meeting. I said that I needed transportation for my kids. So now I'm coming to you.
Easy answer. PWN. I don't make that decision. Now, if they're saying that they're requesting dispute resolution, that's different. So again, coming to district office requesting services outside of an IEP team gets pushed back to the IEP team, right? That's got to be addressed through that meeting where you're looking at data and you're either giving them the service, issuing a prior written notice denying that service, or possibly doing an assessment plan. So very distinct situations. And again, we get parents coming to us all the time for services outside the IEP meeting. That's relatively easy to handle. Can't help you with that one. I'm the director. I don't make decisions outside of an IEP team. You must talk to your IEP team to discuss this. If you have issues after that, then we can have a discussion as part of dispute resolution. And that's where during the IEP team at the tail end of that, they should front load the parent. If we can't resolve issues here, district office will contact you. And so then we come into an alternative dispute resolution, ADR, IDR, informal dispute resolution, whatever you call it. There's a process your district should have, whether it's a structured process. Sometimes it's not as structured as I think it should be. But that's where we now say the IEP team made an offer, parent isn't agreeing to certain parts of it. Now we're going to step in to do dispute resolution. Sometimes districts have a third party or SALPAs have a third party doing it. I don't particularly like that method. That's what we're trained for. And you're there to be impartial. Yep. And it should be very easy for us to be impartial. Yeah. Super easy for me. I just compartmentalize everything. And
you look at the data. I mean, you're looking at facts at this point in time. But I mean, so what you were talking about was this notion that, teams are informing parents that if you don't agree that we're going to go to district office. So there's definitely a training
dispute resolution
with district office, but that's where the training comes because we don't have them calling that. I think a lot of times they're like, oh, well, district office will follow up. And then the parent doesn't understand that that's actually a separate process. They think they're going to get their answers because it's more casual, the way that they talk about it. Oh, well, if you disagree, we're going to put in the IEP. So I do think it's important that we're training staff to say, we hear that you disagree, go ahead, we'll note that in the IEP and district office will follow up with dispute resolution.
Or we'll follow up. I mean, because again, that dispute resolution can happen at the school site. And I believe that it should happen at the school site first.
But requires training.
Yeah, well,
in order to be able to do it.
And again, I think part of the process that we've worked on the last couple of years is now we have a technical assistance form where if they don't have consent, then they fill out the form, we get it. And then so there's follow up and then it gets assigned to someone in the department to follow up with that parent. But so again, making sure you're doing prior notices as appropriate, making sure if you're documenting follow up in the notes, you actually do follow up what you say you're going to follow up. And your choices are if a parent makes a request, you're either going to do a prior written notice accepting it with probably an assessment plan, a prior written notice declining that, possibly with an assessment plan to collect more data, or a prior written notice saying we're not going to do that because, and this is the reason why. And I think if you don't do those explicit steps on what we're doing after the meeting, it's going to cause a lot of problems. And the parent's going to say, what happened to this? I asked for it and nothing happened. And then ultimately that could be a denial of FAPE, denial of parent participation, a procedural violation. I mean, unnecessarily, when the meeting's done, talk to district office, whether you have a form like we have now, or you send them an email, we parent and consent, this is what they asked for. But there's got to be some process so that we can make sure we follow up with the parent and the parent's entitled for a follow-up. I mean, look at it from that standpoint. They asked for something. You can't just not follow up with that, although it happens.
Yeah, no, it definitely happens. So let's talk about really quickly before, because I want you to go more in depth on dispute resolution and what that really looks like. But one of the key things that we need to remember is that when we have an independent educational evaluation request, usually we agree to it because it's better that than us filing for due process, right? If they disagree with our assessment.
So just to be clear, if they request an IEE based on an assessment we've conducted, an independent evaluation, we either have to grant that evaluation or we have to file for due process to defend that evaluation.
That is correct.
And it's typically more cost efficient to just do the IEE rather than go through a due process hearing to defend your evaluation.
That is correct. So one of the things that's really important for school sites, and I've seen this time and time again, is to ensure that they have a point person and they have people that are willing to work with that IEE assessor. Oftentimes there's kind of this mentality of, well, someone else is doing the assessment, we're good. We don't have to do anything. that person needs to coordinate, observation time. They need to coordinate assessment time. They need to get records. They need to get all of this stuff. So in that moment, you also have to make sure that as a follow-up, you are putting them in touch with the right person at the school site that is going to be able to help them with everything that they need to get this IEE assessed. There is no timeline, but we also want it done as soon as possible so that we can hopefully move the process forward.
It's supposed to be a timeline, but typically IEEs aren't subject to that.
That is correct. That is correct.
And then, just a little asterisk on the IEE. IEEs have to be considered. They do not have to be followed. The recommendations do not have to be made part of the IEP if the team feels that they're inappropriate. So we always think that we blindly take on those recommendations and services. We could always push back and say, yeah, it's not appropriate for this kid for X, Y, and Z. So something we need to consider doesn't necessarily mean we have to adopt.
So let's talk a little bit more about ADR, or dispute resolution. Okay. So if you were the school site administrator and you were following up, and again, you've already, suggested, which I think is a really good suggestion, to have maybe a site administrator that wasn't in that meeting, kind of follow up with that parent just in regard to their concerns or the area that they disagree with. What do you recommend for that administrator walking into that meeting with that parent?
So they're going to try to do dispute resolution at the site level. You have to hear parent concerns. Most of these challenges come up because the parents feel like they're not being heard, or they feel that their kids aren't receiving the appropriate services. So you have to be able to listen to a parent non-judgmentally, empathetically. You have to be able to take a look at the data to defend the district offer of FAPE and try to hear the parents' concerns, and maybe do that extra meeting, continue to work on building that positive relationship, continuing to build on the fact that we're here to support your kid to try to get them to understand FAPE. If that does not work, then ultimately it's district office, and district office now becomes negotiations. Yeah. So all bets are off with data. Rarely comes into play with dispute resolution now, because now I'm trying to keep the relationship intact. I need to make sure that you can go back to that school and continue to engage in positive communications. What do I need to do to ensure that?
But I also want to be clear, you're not just handing out everything, because that's a mistake that people make, where they assume that as soon as it goes to district office, you're just going to give them everything that they want.
No, but again, this is why district office should be involved in this, because I will give them something that you probably don't want. Yeah. And it might be, I'm just giving you some examples, like they want to exit speech. And so the parent doesn't want the kid exited in speech. So I might say, well, we're going to keep speech on for the semester, and then we'll take a look at the data to see how your kid's doing. So the speech therapist might not like that. Well, you couldn't convince a parent to exit speech, then this is what we're going to do instead. We are going to keep the relationship intact. ADR is about negotiations and meeting halfway. So at the IEP meeting, the district offer of FAPE was this, and the parent wants this. And there's no budging. No one wants to budge. So what dispute resolution is supposed to do is try to get these two entities to come together to agree on services, maybe temporary. It may be, hey, it's a senior year. The parent wants speech for the rest of the year. I'm not going to argue with that. And I'm not going to file for due process for keeping speech on for a year. That's not something worth an engagement. And I keep the relationship intact. So you have to be skilled enough to know where can you really go with negotiating with the parent. And that's what it comes down to. Again, I can't emphasize enough. The parent relationship with the school has to remain intact. It has to continue to be positive. And I'm not going to discontinue a service if the kid's a junior or the kid's a senior. So we need to have engage in those conversations. We can take a look at some data, but now it's really trying to maintain relationships. Yeah.
And it's, what hill are you going to die on, right? So if you know that you're going to prevent a due process filing, or the parent storming to district office and telling the superintendent about how awful and how, horrible the special ed department is, it's about repairing that relationship, like you said, and rebuilding that trust that they no longer have at the school site. So unfortunately, that's sometimes what is happening as well.
School sites mistakenly think an ADR session is, I'm going to tell the parent that they're going to agree to this. Yeah. And I'm going to force you to agree to this. Yeah. And so they think, oh yeah, district office is going to help us. District office is going to support us. That's not what it's about. Yeah. If you think that's what it's about, you don't have a realistic expectation for dispute resolution. So I'm pretty frank. I tell teams, I'm going to meet with the parent. And we're going to have to find a middle ground. We're going to have to find a compromise so that we each get what we want and how that's going to work and what that's going to look like. And when I'm done, I'm going to let you know what that looks like.
Yeah. And it's clear you're not giving them everything, and you're also not forcing them to go whatever route the IEP team went.
Yeah. And then at the end of the day, we try to do dispute resolution. And if we cannot do that, then one of two things happens. The parent can initiate a due process filing to try to convince a judge of what they want. We may initiate a due process filing if we feel the service is required for the kid to offer FAPE. So I'll give you an example, like we want a non-public school and the parent wants to keep the kid at a comprehensive site. And we know by keeping that kid at a comprehensive site, the students and the staff may be in danger. If this kid needs a non-public school, technically I'm supposed to file for due process to get this kid in a non-public school. Now we're talking about speech from 60 minutes to 30 minutes. I'm not going to file for due process to reduce speech from 60 to 30 minutes. It doesn't even make any sense to me. The SLP might make sense to that person and they might not be happy, but I'm not going to file for due process for that. We start looking at, part of our job as admin is being fiscally responsible, right? I'm not going to initiate due process filings for every little thing and nickel and dime, because ultimately those proceedings are lengthy and they're costly. So I'm going to do a cost analysis. Is providing this service cheaper than a due process filing? 99 out of 100 times it is. Yeah. And so I'm going to wind up looking at a compromise to provide a service than initiate a due process filing.
Well, and that's different though than them requesting 5,000 services that the student currently does not have, right? And you basically saying there's no data to support that and doing it for
assessments.
UN. This is an easy, well, we're just going to reduce services that are already in place, and the parent feels very strongly. That's also, I say that's on the team also to say, hey, you guys could have worked through that. That's not a big ask right there for you guys just to have the 60 minutes continue that the kid has already been doing for 3 years. So I think it's also training the teams on what is reasonable and what is not reasonable. If the parent is ultimately really if you remove those 30 minutes, my kid is going to suffer, then, hear that parent out and say, okay, you know what, we're going to continue. That's no skin off our back. We're going to be okay.
Yeah. And I think we have to be willing to justify our decision-making process and to continue communication with the parent as to why we think this is the route to go. Look at over time, revisit, is the kid still making progress because we took away a service or we reduced service? I mean, this isn't one meeting. We talked about the planning, the meeting, the after. This isn't one moment in time that's just in isolation, right? There's fluidity to it. And whatever decisions we make here we can still track those decisions in the future. And if we made a wrong decision, we can always course correct. If we made the right decision, then we're going to have data to support that we made the right decision. So I think, we shouldn't take a look at these as snapshots. We should take a look at this process as ongoing to making sure that the kid is being successful throughout their educational time with us. And I think that's what really counts. And that's what we need to be able to have discussions with parents and with students to make sure that they're accessing education and they're being successful in their environment with their services.
Yeah. That was beautifully said.
Thank you. It's a nice day out here. I think I'm getting caught up in the poetry of the weather, I think.
That and follow up. So whatever he said and making sure you follow up after the meeting. I think those are our key takeaways for today.
Yeah. So that's end of part 3 of a 3-part series. Are we doing another? I like doing the mini series.
I like the series. I think the series is a good way because we kind of get to work through different aspects of things. And hopefully you walk away with tips on things that can help you.
I think we're going to be engaging in math for our next, the ever controversial, how do we teach math for the next episode?
That's like a love-hate relationship for some people. I love it, but a lot of people don't. So that'll be a good one.
We got to make everyone have a love relationship.
Love.
Math.
Yeah.
That'll be next episode, right?
That sounds good to me.
All right. This has been Mosaic Days. I'm Leonard Martinez.
And I'm Allison Smith. Have a good weekend.
Thank you for joining us.